and preparing. It's always doing these technical things for the first time.
I totally understand.
It's like beautiful. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to our live trigger proof using conflict to heal the past and reclaim your power. We had a couple of technical difficulties. We're a couple of minutes behind schedule. We want to give folks a minute or two to come in. So just welcome and thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited about today's program. And me and Dr. Nima are going to present to you some information that I believe is going to be a true game changer. And so I'm just going to set the stage here while some people come in. It's such an important topic. People, when we're all dealing with so much chaos and trauma, and when we hit conflict, I know when I've hit conflict, it's so typical for us to kind of look at the who and the what outside of us and get caught in a spiral. And there's so much of a better way of going forward. And so today we're really going to talk about how our triggers inform what our trauma is, and that the way we heal our trauma is through a key tool and some processes that we're going to share with you today. And so my name is Karen McMahon. I'm the founder of Journey Beyond Divorce. Divorce is one of those really big crises where trigger and trauma comes right to the surface, but there's many other crises as well. And so I have a podcast, Journey Beyond Divorce podcast. Dr. Nima was on just last week. We were having this brilliant conversation, and we decided to come on together to speak to you. And before I let Dr. Nima introduce himself, I want to say that meeting Dr. Nima was so amazing for me because I've been doing this trigger trauma work for a while, but Dr. Nima has a very special approach that went a level so much deeper than I even realized was there. And so together, we're going to hopefully really blow your mind and give you some incredible tools to use. Dr. Nima, hi.
It is so great to see you and partner with you. And it was like love at first sight when we when we had our interview, like as colleagues, you know, it was like, wow, she really gets it. And I've been interviewed by a lot of people, and I really felt that connection. And so when you offered to do this training for both of our audiences, I thought, you know what? How can I refuse? Because this is such important information. We don't get the training in how to resolve conflict and get the skills in rupture repair. So we all get married with all the highest of hopes. And when shit hits the fan, if we don't really play our cards right internally, we can get sicker. We become taken over by addictions and resentment and health issues, and we can go down a rabbit hole of a downward spiral. Or if we play our cards right, we can use the time to heal what it's really about, and then come out on the other side looking back going, wow, that was like the best thing that ever happened to me. So both of us are really, I really love that we're both wanting to support people in being the second in the second half through conflict, to become better through it rather than deteriorate. So let's do this.
Yeah, and I think that for those of you who are hitting whatever crisis you're hitting, there's such a sense of disempowerment that you're out of control because your circumstance or that person in your life, whether it's your boss or your spouse or your emerging adult or whatever, is triggering you to the hilt, and they need to change. That needs to change for you to feel okay. And I think that is the thing I've heard over the last 15 years with my divorcing clients is it's my ex, it's my attorney, it's the court system, it's my, narcissistic mother, like all of these things. And so I have no power.
Yes, that's the key.
Yeah, and what we're about to share today is a way where you get to like stand in all of your
Hmm.
power and heal at the same
Hmm.
time, which is so
Yeah,
brilliant.
if you choose, not what I've
If you
discovered,
choose.
Karen, and I'm sure you've seen this as well with your clients, is that on a conscious level, we all say we want to heal, but there are hidden agendas and motives that many of us aren't aware of in our blind spots that literally go contrary to our healing without us even becoming aware of it. So I became, as a chiropractor, helping people on their journey of healing, I would notice these patterns, and the ones that were able to illuminate those blind spots and find their hidden agendas and motives behind their narrative, behind staying stuck, which is usually involved in a narrative like, it is in a disempowering narrative. Once they identify that and they shift it, healing goes on another level. So I do want to preface this by saying this conversation isn't for everyone. It is for those who are wanting to heal consciously and unconsciously. They are sick and tired of being sick and tired. They're sick and tired of feeling victimized all the time. They're sick and tired of feeling powerless, and they'd like to reclaim power internally, not by extracting it from the outside. So that sad to say, I've had to preface this conversation so many times, and I realize it's not for everyone. So let's
And
do
I
this.
was actually going to say, I was thinking about this earlier. You may be triggered during our conversation. You may be triggered as we talk about
Without a doubt.
what is going on and what has to happen. And I know I actually signed up and just completed a program with Dr. Nima, and I will tell you that as we heal, our ego rises like an angry bear and like no effing way. And so there are certain things that if you start feeling uncomfortable, don't leave. Just
Don't run away.
breathe through it,
Yeah.
notice it, because that means that we're speaking to that part of you that really
Yes.
needs the healing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in other words, in order to become trigger proof doesn't mean trigger less. It means being able to stand in the face of whatever's activating us without running away or getting defensive. And this is a skill that, if we had learned this before we got married, because both of us are divorced, if we had learned this before we got married, it would have totally been a game changer. So I think, I'm teaching what I'm going to speak for myself. I'm teaching what I most needed to learn. And so yes, to leaning in when this conversation becomes activating, and get curious as to what's causing the defensiveness, what part of me feels attacked here,
A
right? So
thousand
let's do
percent.
that.
Yeah. And can you just give a little bit of your background before we
Hmm.
dive in? So they're like, who is this guy, Dr. Neiman? And what
Yeah.
does he know? So
Like,
let's just
who is
share
this guy? He's a
that.
chiropractor. What the heck's he doing? 20 years in the mind body wellness field, helping people primarily with stress related disorders. You start noticing patterns. Ask any doctor or body worker who's been doing their work for more than 10 years. They will tell you there is an inextricable link between your physical health and your emotional health. And what's causing emotional dis-ease? Well, relationship conflict. And so when I would look at people coming in with chronic pain and chronic issues, I would ask them, how long has this been going on for? And they would say 5 years, 10 years. And then I would ask the question, well, what happened 5 years, 10 years ago? And there was inevitably some sort of a rupture within their relational dynamics, a divorce, a grief, a friendship breakup, some sort of a rupture with attachments. And understanding the nervous system, which was my specialty as a chiropractor, our nervous system doesn't really do well when we have a perceived lack of belonging. It means death to our biology if we don't belong, whether we leave a religious group or a cult or a family system. When we have a rupture of attachment and our belonging is threatened, biologically, it causes a downward spiral. So I would just start noticing that, through the years, I wanted to help people and move upstream with the root cause of their health issues, which turned out to be starting and kind of generated from a relational rupture. But it wasn't until my divorce and several failed relationships later, which led me into a codependency and a trauma bond that became abusive. Both of us, both myself and her, abusing one another, me becoming physical, her on the side of emotional, that it had me going, all right, so what am I missing here? I'm a chiropractor. I help people heal. How do these hands that are used to heal, hurt my girlfriend? And it led me into the work of attachment trauma, polyvagal theory, somatic experiencing. And I left my chiropractic practice and I went all in the study of, how did I end up where I was? How can I make sure that I respond differently rather than react the way that I did? I wanted to never, ever react the same way again. And if I can do number 1 and 2, can I have a secure relationship? Can I finish my, get completion with that last relationship and then get to a place where I can have what I've never had before, which is secure attachment. And so now I'm married, beautiful wife, Diana, and we have a son, Dominic. And the concept of being trigger proof was born. The concept of expanding that space between stimulus and response so you can respond without defensiveness, so that you can heal from your past, so that you can create relationships that feel nourishing. So I teach what I most needed to learn. So here we are.
And certainly for my audience listening, it's like it is possible. What Dr. Nima just talked about is doing his own work so that he was fully capable of engaging in a healthy relationship. And so this is just a piece of it. If you're going through the divorce, the legal process, the settlement, the custody, the money does not free you. What frees you is this work, the work of healing your trauma, becoming trigger proof, and being able to be in any kind of relationship with difficult people, with beautiful people, and you being fully in control and empowered to show up the way you choose.
Amen. I love how you put that.
Yeah. So let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about why conflict hurts so much. I remember reading Don Miguel Ruiz wrote The Mastery of Love, and he uses an analogy of us being burn victims and walking around without any skin, so that if anyone bumps into you, even blows in your direction, it hurts. And I felt like that was such a great example of what happens when trauma comes to the surface.
That's right. Well, what happens is, first and foremost, trauma isn't what's happening to us. I got to really make that distinction. It's not what's happening to us. It's what's happening inside of us, in the absence of a empathetic witness to help us process. So as a child, when you are raised in environments when there's conflict, raising a child, you have a son, sometimes at the age of 4, when they hit their teens, they become, disagreeable, very difficult, sometimes downright mean, right? And so there's conflict that happens and rupture that happens. Whether you send them on a timeout, whether you punish them, whether you scream at them, their nervous systems are in dysregulation in that moment, and they don't have the possibility of actually coming back to safety. And when you leave a child to themselves in activation without helping them regulate, the child then makes a meaning. It comes to a conclusion that I must be bad. I myself am bad. And so in the conflict itself, the child abandons themselves, betrays themselves for the sake of attachment. If it's a conflict between my parent and I must be the bad one, because I cannot live in a world where they're the bad ones. It must be me, because if they were the bad ones, then I'm not safe. So to protect myself, I must betray and abandon myself. And that's why conflict in our nervous systems feels like death. That was your first question. And so then what happens without the skill of, like my wife and I, we get into conflict. My son sees it, and then he watches us repair. So he's able to see two people having conflict and then repairing. So we don't try to hide conflict from him, and we don't lose our shit in front of one another without actually, sometimes we raise our voices, but without actually repairing. So his nervous system then learns that it's safe to have conflict, and then we repair each and every time. But how many of us had parents that did that? So our relationship with conflict itself becomes dysfunctional. So we either suppress it because we're afraid of it, or we don't have boundaries and we react because we don't know what to do with it. So then that childhood imprint becomes repeated in adulthood, and divorce attorneys become rich because of it.
Absolutely. And, for my audience, I think that I want to bring you back to, I was in a 12-step program, and I learned how what you just described is, as children, we have this brilliant intuitive sense of how to protect ourselves. And so if mom's a rageaholic, I fly under the radar. I go to my room, I stay quiet. If dad has a certain propensity, I go and I fawn over him and I take care of him and I please him so that I get the love. And so we create these brilliant coping mechanisms.
Characters, essentially.
Yeah, it's like, this is how I stay safe. This is what I've learned I need to do. And then we grow up and we take those same coping mechanisms, which are not healthy because they came out of dysfunction, into relationships. And that's where this whole dysfunctional dance ends up happening. And we don't even realize our trauma because this is what we've lived with. This is my coat of armor that I put on. It's helped me.
It's the fishbowl of dirty water that you were born into. You don't know it's dirty water. You just think that it's just normal. It's normalized. Beautiful analogy.
Right. And I think that what happens, and I know with my relationship and so many of my clients, you then take on these people-pleasing or codependent behaviors, and you think you're being so good, but you're actually trying to control the other person.
It's a form of manipulation, isn't it?
Yeah. And even that, like, that'll be the first thing where your ego goes, not me, I'm not the manipulator, right? So that's the beginning of it.
Yeah. Me? No, I'm blameless. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And this is exactly, did you have a question around that? Because there's so much to add to that.
Yeah, jump in.
Yeah, it's, we're not aware that we have actually, in a face-off between attachment, maintaining attachment to mom and dad, and expressing who we truly are, our authentic self. If we got the experience that expressing our authentic truth results in love being withdrawn or it's unacceptable, then we're going to suppress our authentic truth and put on a mask and create characters and coping mechanisms, as you said, to get our attachment needs met. And we don't know that we're doing this, but this becomes our personality: the good girl, the nice guy, the one who's the peacemaker, the whatever it is to get our needs met, even getting attention. And you were forgotten, so you became the troublemaker to get whatever needs met of attention, whatever. And so we are not aware that we are born into this fishbowl of dirty water. It's a system that we are kind of groomed and grown into, and it doesn't become apparent until we get into romantic relationships and we are finding ourselves acting out these same dynamics. For example, the people-pleasing one, you're saying yes and people-pleasing, and you've developed a character of abandoning yourself for the sake of attachment, being the good person, and then after 20, 30 years, developing a health issue, autoimmune issues, resentment. And all of a sudden now you're feeling unfulfilled, and because you've partnered with somebody who matches that exact pattern beautifully so that you can live it, not, and now you feel victimized by this person who is devouring, who is controlling, who constantly wants to get their way, but you're not realizing that that's all you've ever known. And so
Right.
this isn't really to expose fault or blame, but this is to expose the unconscious identity that we've been playing out and repeating. If we want to heal and we want to resolve the conflict, we got to go back and resolve that conflict first.
100%. And one of the main things when I'm talking, of course, many of my clients and followers are in high conflict situations. And so this concept of you've abandoned yourself, like that's a really hard one for people to swallow. But once they begin to understand it, and you just said it so beautifully, like this training, this beginning of abandoning oneself begins when we're young, unconsciously, again, brilliantly knowing how to stay safe is the beginning of abandoning ourselves. I'm not going to be me. Because just being me got me yelled at, got me in trouble, got me the cold shoulder or iced out. And so when we abandon ourselves, and Dr. Nima is saying it in different words than me, but when we abandon ourselves, we become adults. And then as a self-abandoning adult, I am going to attract an adult who's going to abandon me. And
Yes.
that blew my mind when I first learned and started my healing process many years ago and started looking at how often I would abandon myself at home with my parents, and then with my boyfriends, and then with my husband. And then it's like, well, why aren't they committing to me? Well, what energy am I bringing to the table too? I'm completely abandoning myself.
We should give examples of what that looks like in real time, so that people can kind of recognize what does it look like to self-abandon. So I'd love for you, do you want to start by sharing how you did it, and then let's talk about what it actually looks like, because people don't know really what that means.
Yeah. So when I say yes, when I want to say no, I'm abandoning. So I married somebody who had credit issues. My name was on everything, on the cars, on the house. Well, he wanted to refinance 5 times. We refinanced our house. Now I had all the control. I was legally the only one. It was my credit. I was perfectly capable of saying no.
Yeah.
But I was completely
yourself.
Incapable of saying no at that time. And so with each of these 5 refinances, I felt so angry at him.
Exactly.
Angry at him that he would put me in this position. But I kept saying yes when I wanted to say no.
That's one of the signs that I'd love for people listening to really see. One of the signs of self-abandonment is resentment. You just said it. Because when your body says no, whether it's sexual, you're talking about fawning, people pleasing, which is a trauma response where you oppose what your body is saying. So you can do it sexually, on a date, when somebody leans in to kiss and you freeze and you give the signal of consent, but your body is saying no because you don't want it to be weird, or you don't want to seem like a burden or a bad person or whatever. That's called fawning, people pleasing. And so we cannot fawn and people please, which is a form of self-abandonment, as you described, without resentment. So what happens is we resent the other person because how dare they put us in that situation? But deep down, and this is going to be very triggering, we're actually resenting ourselves, which is another form of self-abandonment, which is when we blame ourselves. After it's done, we have regrets and we go, I can't believe I did that. I should have said no. I hate myself for it.
Yes.
And we beat ourselves up for abandoning ourselves, which is another form of self-abandonment and betraying ourselves because we lack understanding to the younger parts of us that had to do what they had to do to survive. And rewiring this pattern is a process, but it can be done. And so the key of self-abandonment is your animal body constricts and says no, but you say forwardly, you give consent. So that could be, hey, Nima, could you help me move this weekend? And I have a back issue. And I'm like, sure, I'll do this. I'll happy to do that, right? And then all of a sudden my back goes out. And as a chiropractor, I would notice this quite a bit because patients coming in with symptoms, they don't realize a lot of it is because of self-abandonment. And the best example that I can give was a beautiful woman that I was dating years ago, and she really liked me. And when we went on a date, I said, I have the best restaurant I want to take you to. Let's go. And so I take her to my favorite Indian restaurant. And I said, don't worry, let me handle this. I want to impress her. I got her the butter chicken, the garlic naan, and we're eating, and she's eating. She goes, it's great. And then the next day I ask her, I'm like, hey, how are you feeling? She's like, I'm totally sick. I am like bedridden. I said, what's the matter? She's like, well, I'm gluten free and I'm vegan. And I'm like, wait, what? You just let me order you butter chicken, which is cream. It's got dairy, it's got meat because it's chicken, and then naan, which has got gluten. But she said yes. So she abandoned herself for the sake of pleasing me, I guess. And so her body then revolts. So I wanted to introduce this concept to people who've never heard this, is that your body becomes the boundary when you yourself are too afraid to set it. So the symptomatology of our body is oftentimes the boundary that we're not able to say. We can defer to the body and go, oh, I'd love to come to your party, but I'm just super duper sick, because you don't know how to say no, right? So your body is not working against you. It's working for you because you're the one abandoning yourself.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And I think that I want to bring in what you said before too. I have spent so many years criticizing myself and a less refined version of myself in my early stages of divorce. I used to call myself an effing idiot all the time. You're such an effing idiot. And now it's like that makes my skin crawl. But there was I had so much self-judgment. And when I learned, and I would love for you to expound on this, when I learned that I was doing to little Karen, to my inner child, what mom did to me. I was just re-traumatizing myself, and I was putting myself down. So it's like, first I'm saying yes to you when I want to be saying no. And then I'm like, you're such an idiot. You're such an effing. And so I want you, for those of you listening, I want you to just take a deep breath and just for a moment, scan your history and your behavior, your relationship with yourself. Have you criticized yourself? Have you put yourself down? Have you said yes when you wanted to say no? Can you see moments where you were self-abandoning? Because in that willingness to look deep and be really honest is the opening to the pathway to the healing we're going to talk about.
Yeah, 100%. Beautifully said. And so I have another kind of level of awareness of that, because this is something that we talk about constantly in our Cycle Breakers Academy, people who are committed to healing from the past and breaking these generational cycles so they don't pass it on to their kids. I want you to imagine a child, and I use this as kind of like the shadow, the child part of us that maybe had a critical and controlling type of parent. And when they make a mistake, the parent, they feel rejection from the parent. And so what this child does, and it's just heartbreaking when you realize it, what this child does is to protect themselves from the pain of external rejection. They wire in a conditioning of beating themselves up, as you described, putting yourself down, saying that I'm the bad one, and just how can you be so dumb, to get ahead of the hate so that and the rejection so they don't have to hear it from mom.
Wow.
So think about that. So in order to heal this, we have to then go to another level of awareness that sees that self-hate as a form of self-love. Not to shame the self-hate, but to see the little girl who's trying to get ahead of the rejection, to control it, because it's way better. I would rather hate myself than to hear that from my mother. And when you see that, let your heart just break for the child that does this. And that's when it starts to reverse, to see the self-hate as a form of self-protection.
Self-protection. That's, you see, I love the work you do, Dr. Nima.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
That's a game changer. I got goosebumps when I think about it. And when you think about the child that does that, I'm watching this, I love sports documentaries. I'm watching this one about the Boston Red Sox. We're watching it right now. It's like a 4 or 5 part series. And there's a guy with mental health issues on the Boston Red Sox. His name is Jaron Duran. He's like an all-star. You know him?
I know the name.
Jaron Duran, he's an all-star, but he's very, they've got him mic'd up in the clubhouse and everything. I highly recommend you see it. And he just, when he makes a mistake, it's, you're an idiot, you're this, right? And so he's very outspoken about his mental health issues, right? And so this self-hate that he's doing, I'm watching it with the perspective that I have as, a facilitator and kind of like a trauma-informed facilitator. I'm looking at that. I'm saying, if he wants to heal it, he can. But it's not to hate on his self-hating parts. It's to understand them and bring love and compassion towards them. Because you can't shame yourself into a version of yourself that you love, even shaming the self-hating parts, right? So it's like this work becomes a practice of finding parts of ourselves and bringing compassion to them, even the parts that are self-annihilating. They have a protective function as well. And this is the dance of healing from the past.
Yeah, 100%. And we live in, we're balls of energy. And so we live in various levels of emotional energy. And a lot of what we're talking about is being the victim, feeling the victim, right? I've been victimized, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, like how firmly we fight for that victim position and being in conflict. But the healing is in all of the shades of love above that, which starts with self-love and healing those trauma wounds so that you can respond differently. A lot of times when I'm talking to clients, I'll stop them and say, when they tell about a trauma situation that happened and how they reacted to it, how old do you feel? And, they'll kind of cock their head and be like, well, what do you mean? Well, like, emotionally, how old do you feel? And so often our little kid is driving the bus, which is never a good thing. And so
the child inside of us,
yeah, the little child inside of us, and that triggered reactivity is like driving where you can't even see above the steering wheel, right? It's like you're going to crash, and we do crash. And I think that the whole concept of inner child work is something I'd like to just put on the table right now and talk about, because I don't think that people understand completely what that means. Even though we just talked about how it starts in childhood, it's like, well, what do you mean, my inner child? I'm a middle-aged woman. So can you touch on that?
Yeah, absolutely. When we go through life, experiencing, trauma, which is activation, it's energy, it's charge, emotional charge that's happening inside of us. We then, to cope, the sensations are so much for the childlike part of us to bear that we actually split from ourselves. We leave our bodies energetically, and we fracture and we fragment, right? So, for example, if you were raised and then dad left and you felt the pain, the sting of abandonment, the childlike part of you at the age of, let's say, 5 or 6 that was disappointed by dad leaving will say, never again. Never again will I allow myself to feel this pain. So what happens is we then split and we create a kind of a part of us, a protector, to protect us from the vulnerable child that was hurt. So then what happens is this pain, this vulnerable part gets kind of frozen in our nervous system. And then we develop this protective part that becomes needless, that becomes super strong, that becomes walled off from vulnerability. So now we are walking around with this one part that's super duper vulnerable and really tender that we don't ever want to experience again. So we create this part and we take on this character of protective, staunch, needless, walled off, right? And now what happens is this part becomes in what's called our shadow. The shadow is the dismissed, denied, exiled part of us that's vulnerable, that's painful. And this is our inner child, the child inside of us. Or if you don't like the term, you can use the term younger part. We all have it. In fact, we are mostly 8 to 12-year-olds walking around in adult bodies. If you don't believe me, just notice how we react when you're watching somebody. Notice how they react. And the way that we know they come out is through our reactions. And these painful parts are there, and we don't know that they're there until we enter relational dynamics. And all of a sudden, we are unconsciously seeking to resolve the pain of that younger part through our intimate partnerships. And within the relationship dynamic, these parts become triggered. These shadow parts, the younger parts, become triggered because what is happening energetically is they're saying, you forgot about me. You've exiled me. Right. I'm not going away. I need attention. Like a child, like my son, when he needs attention and I say, go away, it doesn't make him calm down. He gets louder. Same thing with the child inside of us. So if we don't turn towards them instead of turning away and creating all these protectors, if we don't turn towards them and parent them the way they weren't and give them what they didn't receive, they will burn our lives to the freaking ground again and again and again so that we can turn towards them. And many of us just never learn. We just keep going from one cycle to another, turning away from them until, this is what happened with me, until I woke up and realized that my entire life was a mask of creating this Dr. Nima character who was this healer and this really great dancer and who was entertaining on stage and funny and an amazing chiropractor, all so that I didn't feel that vulnerable, exiled 2-year-old self that felt abandoned by his mother when she left for a few months to go to Canada from Iran to explore immigrating. And I was literally operating from this protective character, egoic mask, so that I didn't feel that part. And it wasn't until I went and turned towards that part and went to become the parent that I didn't have, that I was stuck in that frozen state in intimate relationships. And that's what would get triggered. And that was what triggered my reactivity in my last relationship. So you can deny, the people who deny and have the biggest problem with this concept of the inner child are the ones that need it the most.
100%. And I want to bring this next concept, and then I want to dive a little bit more into, okay, how do we actually reparent? Because I think that's where, that's where the gold is. But what we do instead is we grow up and we fall in love with somebody who's supposed to take care of all of that.
Yeah,
And
supposed
it's
to. I love that word.
unconscious. We're not like thinking, oh, you're gonna, but we are. And so we get really, we create conflict when we show up and I have a lack, and why is my spouse not taking care of it? And that's what, and so I don't see, especially in the high conflict marriages, right? You don't see your spouse's inner child, their childhood wounds, you just see their displeasing behavior, and they see your displeasing behavior. And so we end up with this situation in the world of high conflict divorce where people are throwing emotional grenades across the room at each other, and everybody's blaming the other one, because if I'm hurt, you had to be the cause of it. And that's the big lie, right? And it's like, that doesn't mean someone's behavior isn't displeasing, but I always say to my clients, whatever your triggers are, they predate the marriage, they predate the engagement, they predate meeting the man or woman. And, in 12-step programs, they say if it's hysterical, it's historical, right? And so when we go from 0 to 100 in a hot second, that is not something that's happening in the moment. That's something that has been with you for a very long time.
Absolutely it is. It's never about what it's about. This is what I want everybody to get, is that it's never about what it's about. And you either have two ways of handling life. Either you feel the discomfort of triggers and you build your life to avoid them, and over time your life gets smaller and smaller and smaller, or you wake up and you realize that they're not your fault. They're just buttons that they've been placed from childhood, and they are going to be pushed again and again because they represent parts of you that want resolution, that want compassion, that want understanding, that want empathy from you. And if you don't learn how to give them to you, you're going to forever be seeking outside of you for this elusive, mysterious, magical other that is supposed to, I like how you use the word supposed to, that is supposed to protect you from the pain that younger self experienced. But alas, they will be the very ones that actually trigger it. And so without this awareness in this context, you're going to go through your relationship, through your divorce, in a victim narrative, feeling emotional pain from what the other person is saying or doing, and you'll react, and you're not realizing that they're actually supposed to be bringing up stuff from your past that you haven't gotten complete with. And in reaction to what they're doing, you're going to do stuff to them that's going to bring their stuff in the past. In other words, you're not just a victim, you're also a perpetrator, right? Unconsciously, because you're reacting. Every perpetrator feels justified in their perpetration. It just keeps going back and forth and back and forth. Victim, perpetrator, victim, perpetrator. And so without understanding your role in it and seeing the bigger picture, you're stuck in this, they're hurting me, I'm going to get back at them, whether it is through reputation, talking shit, legal, whatever. And it just keeps going back and forth, and divorce attorneys are cashing in with this unconsciousness.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to understand that we marry the wounds of our childhood. And
Consciously, yeah.
There's a book, Getting the Love You Want, with Harville Hendricks and Helen Hunt, and they were the founders of Imago Therapy. And they do such an eloquent job of explaining that when we feel like we've met our soulmate, it's because on an unconscious level, there's so much similarity to our childhood dance, but we're in limerence and lust, and we don't see it until we get to the next level. And then the emotional grenades start falling. And so let's pivot with the time we have left to some some baby steps that people can take. So this whole concept of healing your younger self, your inner child, I talk to people, and Dr. Nima has a really deep level that he goes into. But even on a surface level, when you get triggered, to stop and take a moment to tune into your experience and your younger self and what's going on. And I would describe my inner child as a scared kitten who wasn't coming out from behind the couch because I'd been yelling and screaming at her for years, decades. And so the inner child work actually takes a little bit of time because there's this part of us, the shadow part of us, that doesn't trust us. I've been the perpetrator to my younger self. And so I have to really acknowledge and validate and sit with and be gentle and kind with. And what ultimately happens, and we both have different programs that we're going to share with you, is there's this ability to integrate your younger wounded self so that you show up mature
As an
and
adult.
responsive and as an adult. And
Yeah.
the freedom and joy that comes with getting there is, I mean, I don't know that I have words for it.
Yeah. You mentioned getting the love you want. I can't really get the love I want from my child and teenager consciousness, because from that space, I'm entitled, and entitled energy is very repulsive. If you don't believe me, think back of a time somebody's on a date with you, ladies, for example, and he bought you the steak and the lobster, so he feels entitled to sex. That's repulsive, right? And so we unconsciously show up entitled without knowing it, because the child part of us is quite entitled. And so this is really about bringing your adult self online so you become magnetic, so that when you're in relationship, you're speaking as your adult self. Doesn't mean that you don't have needs. It means that you can express them, consciously. And if they're not willing to meet you there, you have the wherewithal of kind of moving on, saying, okay, that's cool. That's totally cool. There was a woman in our in who attended the overview experience, 28 years married to this guy, constantly trying to tell him what, my needs aren't getting met, what's going on, what's happening. I need you to do some sort of therapy, some sort of work. And he kept dismissing her. Finally, she attends my overview experience. And through that experience, she made a connection with that younger part of her, and saw the framework of how she contributed to the dynamic. And she told me just right a few days after, she goes, something clicked for me. And so I approached my husband and I said, listen, I just realized, I just went to this event, this is not your fault and it's not my fault. We've done, I've tried, we've raised some amazing children, it's time for me to move on. And she said that with such love, with such an open heart, and something shifted within him because she shifted internally. And he all of a sudden was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. No, how could you do this? Whoa, what is it going to take? What do we do? He goes, she said, for 10 years, I've been trying to get you to look at your behavior, to heal your stuff, to heal your traumas, because it's affecting me. And he's like, whatever, I'll do whatever. And she reached out to me. She goes, I can't believe that this happened. I was ready to walk away. And now he's coming to your next overview. He just signed up to the next overview experience that's coming up. And a lot of times what I'm doing is I'm helping. This is what I notice with women. Women are the ones that feel the dissatisfaction, that bring it up with their partners, and their partners get defensive. They take it like, oh my God, am I not good enough? Look at all the things that I am doing. And that's not what she's saying. She's saying that she wants to be met emotionally. Number one, she doesn't know how to meet herself emotionally. And number two, she doesn't realize that she's replaying a childhood pattern with him. And the more entitled that she is in child energy and trying to fix him, the more it's pushing him away. And until she decides that she's going to learn how to meet her own needs, and she stops pushing, she just flows her energy towards her own growth, he's not going to change. And that's when he decides to, all right, I want to become a team in the relationship. But oftentimes, unfortunately for men, it's too late because she's already been trying and she's already given up. But, they're going to be starting this process now of learning the skills individually. And you don't have to go through couples counseling to try to get validation from mom. It's about learning the skill to become trigger proof and master the art of conflict and rupture and repair. And it is possible. You can do it even after 28 years of marriage.
And I want to even say, I know we're wrapping up soon, but for all of you who are in divorce or on the other side of divorce, you may be struggling with your teenagers or your emerging adults. And so we're not just talking here about a relationship with a partner. We're talking about all of your relationships. And so every relationship you're in has the opportunity for you to be looking at this dynamic and doing your work. And the more you can show up as an adult, the more you can start breaking those generational chains, because the way you handle your children, your teenagers, your emerging adults, the way you hold space for them and see what's going on is going to change.
Beautifully said, 100%. This isn't about just conflict, like you said, within a relationship, partnership, like a marriage. With your children are also triggering. Everything that triggers you about your child is an invitation to view yourself, parts of you. And I don't know if I told you this story. One of my people in our program, Andrea, cycle breaker, she was having real big problems with her teenage daughter. And she found out that her 18-year-old daughter, who is kind of a little bit on the spectrum, has been having a long distance relationship online with an older man. And it really, like, she reaches out, she's super duper triggered, and she's like, taking her to the counselor, young lady, this is not appropriate, and going into that authoritarian stuff. And I was like, let's hold on and let's do the work on this. And so she went inside and I asked her this question, which I'm inviting everybody to look at, what are you making this mean about you? And she's like, I'm bad, I'm unworthy, right? She's blaming herself as a mother. So she's reacting to her own, I'm unworthy, right? And so that there's a younger part. And it turns out that when she was younger, she got on a long distance internet type of relationship by a man who was catfishing her. And because she didn't have any boundaries, he then moves in with her, steals all her money, even tried to sell her furniture, and then got her pregnant. And she told her mother and everybody, I'm keeping this baby, right? And the guy took off, he left. And this was the father of his daughter, right? And so this was like a complete mind fuck where she was like, oh my God, she is reliving the parts of me that I've been carrying in such shame. And so this gave an opportunity for her, as we were working together, for her to go back and find her, late 20s version of herself, who was already divorced with 2 boys. And when her boys would go and visit the father, she would just drink. She would just go to the bar because she was in such peril and such loneliness that she let this complete catfish dude from the internet into her life and almost, stole all her money before she finally woke up, because she was so boundaryless, but then impregnated her. And then decided, well, I'm going to keep the baby and every one of her friends, family thought she was crazy, but she raised this child because she said, this child saved my life because it gave me purpose, somebody to need me. But she didn't deal with that shame until her daughter turns 18 and repeats the exact same unhealed wounds that she's been carrying. So all of this to say, and as she did the work, she was able to connect with her daughter and share her shame. And her daughter got it, and their relationship is totally transformed because she did the work. Other mothers would have just sent them to a therapist so that the therapist can tell her how unacceptable that was. But in reality, this was a part of herself, and she really got it. The cycle breaker really gets that the trigger in front of me, it's not about the child in front of me, it's about the kid inside of me. And so this is what I'm really committed to teaching people how to navigate and master.
Yeah, and you know, many years ago when I first started this work, I did a book called The Presence Process, and it was a 10-week meditative journey. And the first week, the mantra was, I accept my reflections in the world. And what happened was life became utterly chaotic. My inner world presented on the outside. And that's very much what we're talking about today. Like, we're all walking around with our childhood wounds, and you get into these situations, circumstances, relationships, and you think it's them or it, when in fact, the invitation is, whenever you're experiencing dis-ease, if you go in rather than try to control what's outside of you, even your teenagers or your ex, when you go in and heal and become the adult, then you get to have like the most brilliant relationships. And there's so much more that we can talk about.
Oh yeah, we can
You
go
know,
on forever,
a
Karen.
key tool to all of this is boundaries. And I know my audience is mostly been raised in boundary oblivion, and what is a boundary and how do I do it? And it's such a critical part. And so, you know, we have trauma, we have triggers, and then boundaries is such a key tool, and that inner child work. But today, I think we'd each like to leave you with a tool, and we have a gift. And Dr. Nima has a couple of amazing programs that you can learn about. But I want to say to you, step one is just noticing. So we've thrown a ton of. I'm going to start noticing what my triggers are, and maybe just write them down. When my son does X, I feel disrespected. When this happens, I shut down and get scared. Like, start noticing what your triggers are. Simply noticing them is a baby step in the right direction.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I would say is the sacred pause. 12-step program says, if you're upset, count to 10. If you're really upset, count to 100. And Eckhart Tolle says it takes about 90 seconds for our pain body to fly up. We get all flush and heated and angry, and then it simmers back down. To the degree, even if you don't have any other tools, that you can notice and you can take a pause, you will begin down that path of calming things when conflict is near.
Yeah, beautiful. What I would add to that, Karen, is when the activation shows up, you are first and foremost putting your hand over that area and taking slow, deep breaths and going to a place of non-resistance to it. Because a lot of times our relationship with our emotions is, you know, like I had a client tell me, you know, I'm sad and I hate that I feel sad. Right. And so it's an emotion and then a shame bind to the emotion itself. And this can be resolved with what I call the 4 permissions. It's an acronym for SOAP. It's safe to feel sad. It's okay to feel sad. I'm allowed to feel sad. I have permission to feel sad. And giving the 4 permissions creates a space of non-resistance, because it's not the emotion that's the problem. It's our resistance to it that keeps it trapped. And so it's like a fart. You know what I mean? It's like when you have to fart or poop, you're not going to sit there and go, oh God, I have to poop again. I thought I pooped yesterday. But that's what we do with our emotions. It's like, yeah, and you're human, and allow it to pass. And when you allow it to pass, you get this sense of relief until the next wave comes in. And so garnering this relationship of non-resistance to our emotions is literally the first step after awareness, as have talked about. And going into the sensation without any story, sensation without explanation. and being in the sensation, because we go into the mind and create story. Oh my God, I can't believe they said that. How disrespectful. And then what I teach my cycle breakers is then when we can go down into the rabbit hole of what am I making this mean about me? I'm not good enough. I'm making it mean that I'm disrespected, that I'm not, then what kind of a person is disrespected? Somebody who's unworthy. Good. Let's go in and feel the unworthiness. And what we're doing here is we're not about numbing our triggers. We're here to expand our capacity to contain them and hold them without losing our center. And this is a practice. It's like building muscle, and anybody can learn it. And it's a very important skill to learn. We have people in our community that are in their 70s and they're like, gosh, I wish I learned this in my 20s, right? So the sooner that you start learning how to expand that capacity, the more capacity you have and resilience you have for challenge, for your entrepreneurship, for your business, to raise children. It's going to involve you being able to sit in difficulty and challenge, not to avoid it. And that's what being trigger proof is all about.
Beautiful. And you have a gift. We each have a gift. So why don't you share yours first?
Yeah, I have this mini course that I have. I can leave it in the comments. It's called Bringing Your Adult Self Online. It's a 4-part kind of like 10-minute mini course that takes you through the path of understanding the root of our anxious and avoidant attachment styles, the push and the pull dynamics of it, and the codependency, and how to actually bring the adult self online. Give that as a gift for you.
Yeah. And that is in the notes just below. So you can click and get that, as well as other hyperlinks for Dr. Nima's site. And then I have a 4-page PDF. It's about strategic emotional mastery. And it talks about our 7 levels of energy that we live in, and that victim and conflict energy, and how heavy and difficult it is, and how learning this process that we're talking about turns into being as easy as like stepping in an elevator and going, I want to be on level 5. I don't want to be in the dungeon on level 1, and really being able to very quickly shift once you've done this work. And so you can find both of those gifts in the notes below. And we just want to thank you for attending, and hope that you can take away a couple of key steps and begin to practice them and see the change that you'll experience. Dr. Nima, thank you so much for joining me on this live.
That was fun, Karen. Anytime, my dear.
And Dr. Nima's program is so amazing. Having gone through it, I'll just say that if you're really yearning to, if this is speaking to you and you're yearning to do this work, you definitely want to check out what he's offering, because it will forever change your situation in a positive way. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.